Hello there, good morning, and many thanks for staying with us here on Citi TV. My name is Nanatufo Boateng. Now, to some breaking news, and the President of the Republic, His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, has given authorization for the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, to formally engage the International Monetary Fund, inviting the fund to support an economic program put together by the government of Ghana. Now, this comes on the back of many calls or several calls for the government to go to the IMF for assistance. Now, it's also hinged on the inflation rates, increasing prices of fuel, food price inflation, and several other sectors. Now, a known member of the NPP recently hinted on social media that indeed the much touted electronic transfer levy had failed to raise the anticipated or targeted revenue, and sought to suggest that, well, the only option left to save the ailing economy might be to go to the International Monetary Fund for assistance. And so as it stands now, Citi News can confirm that President Akufo-Addo has given the go-ahead for the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, to formally engage the International Monetary Fund to support an economic program put together by the government of Ghana. Now, there's a statement from the Ministry of Information, of course, signed by the Sector Minister, Kojo Nkrumah. So I'm going to take that statement so we can all have an idea of exactly what it is we will be going to the IMF for. I'm reading the statement, and it says, the President of the Republic, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, has authorized Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta to commence formal engagements with the International Monetary Fund, IMF, inviting the fund to support an economic program put together by the government of Ghana. Now, this follows a telephone conversation between the President and the IMF Managing Director, Ms. Kristalina Georgieva, conveying Ghana's decision to engage with the fund. Now, at a meeting on June 30, 2022, Cabinet indicated its support for the decision. The engagement with the IMF will seek to provide balance of payment support as part of a broader effort to quicken Ghana's build back in the face of challenges induced by the COVID-19 pandemic and recently the Russia-Ukraine crisis. And this is signed by the Minister for Information, Kojo Nkrumah. So really what it is that, yes, authorization has been given by the President for the Minister in charge of Finance, Ken Ofori-Atta, to begin engaging the IMF formally, but of course not directly as a bailout plan, but of course to invite the fund to support a program, an economic program put together by the government of Ghana. Now, really this is help to cushion the Ghanaian economy, also to help fight rising rates of inflation, and of course to manage the country's debt stock. So really, if we recall, Finance Minister there in your shorts all this while assuring that the country really was not interested in going to the IMF. We've heard him in several press engagements say that government is committed to managing its debt without assistance from the IMF, and we've heard him also express confidence that government's measures were moving the country in the right direction. Government in March early this year announced a raft spending cuts to tackle inflation, reduce the public deficit, restore a depreciating local currency, and also reassure investors of the confidence, or to boost the confidence of investors to invest in the local economy. But consistently, government or its agents or appointees have mentioned that the country had no intent or no plans to go to the IMF for support. We've been gauging the conversations around whether or not government will be going to IMF to seek assistance, and it's been suggestive of that owing to recent revelations that indeed the electronic transfer levy had only accrued 10% of its intended target and was not able to generate the anticipated targets of government. But in studio now, we have our presidential correspondent, Sami Wiafe, and he's going to help us understand the journey to this point, and of course, really what government is seeking from the International Monetary Fund. Good morning, Sami.
Thank you very much, Nana.
Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Finally, we're here. We're going to the IMF. Something we've really, rejected over the period. I mean, there have been suggestions or recommendations or sometimes appeals for government to go to the IMF, but government agents and appointees, even ministers over the period, have insisted that government's measures and policies are really moving the country in the right direction, and so there was no need for the IMF. But today, we're seeing this statement where the president has formally or authorize the Minister for Finance to engage the IMF. Your thoughts on this before we go into the details?
Good morning. It was expected because in time past you've heard government officials or even the president blame the current challenges we're going through with regards to the economy on the COVID-19 pandemic, the Russia-Ukraine war. You know, a lot of people have said that, Ukraine more or less did a lot of things when it comes to world production. So if they are under attack, you expect some of these things to happen. Several times, as you said, government officials have also denied that. Remember the finance minister, one of the town hall meetings during the COVID, the E-levy said that there was no way government was going or the country was going to seek help from the IMF. And finally, we are here to realize that the president has given authorization for this to happen. They've tried a number of solutions to see how best to fix the economy. Remember some months back there was a cut
somewhere in March
on the salaries of all public sector workers, especially the political appointees, 20%. Even the Council of State members even had to cut their salary, hoping that this was going to work out. But I realized that no, it wasn't really. They brought in the E-levy, expecting that it would give the needed support for revenue generation. It didn't work. We saw a tweet from a leading member of the party saying that it hasn't generated enough. So the only option left was a bailout. So this decision, as you said, was taken yesterday. The cabinet meeting yesterday was basically on the economy. It was basically on the economy, what government was going to do to revive it. And the IMF option looked like the only possible available. It will be a difficult decision because I've spoken to people in government and they believe that this was a very tough decision for the president and cabinet to take. They've already said they are not going. Now they are going. Political opponents will obviously use it against them ahead of elections. So it was a very, very tough decision and they had no option. This was the only option for them to go.
But clearly the timing of the decision to go to the IMF, had it come earlier, I mean, would they have salvaged the situation to an extent? We know that government really has instituted some measures to tackle the current economic challenges. But really, had we decided to go to the IMF earlier, as and when, for want of a better expression, if we had gone to the IMF, would we have had a better economy than what we are having now?
I think so. I think so because you started with what people call the homegrown solutions. You realize the first instance it didn't work. So the only option was to seek an IMF bailout. You were waiting for a number of months or a while to see if these homegrown solutions were going to work. Immediately you sense that these things are not going to work. The IMF is always available to everyone. Their doors are always open. Seek that help immediately and see how best you can save the economy. I feel it's better late than never. It's better, at least you have quite a number of years to the end of your tenure. I mean, the president. So bringing the IMF in here was having the situation. But a lot of people fear that when you bring the IMF into your economy, there are going to be some restrictions. Of course, because we saw what happened during the
fiscal
era,
discipline and all
self-discipline, right? You can't raise some expenditure. You have to cut down on certain things, freeze employment in certain areas. Though we don't know the details of this particular help from the IMF. We are told that by Monday, government will give details of what is seeking the IMF today and what the IMF will also present onto the table. Obviously, we'll see job freezes, employment in certain sectors. We've seen that in previous years. We expect other things to happen. So by Monday going, we'll have a clearer picture of how this bailout or this help is going to be.
Hopefully we'll get the details by Monday, but let me go over the phone lines and speak to an economist, Dr. Edu Sarkodie. Good morning, sir, and many thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Grateful. Now, government finally has given authorization for some engagements to begin with the IMF. The timing of this decision, what do you make of it and its impact on our economy going forward?
The timing is good. We are in need of it. Government has run out of options. No matter the policies that the government has, he has to find funds to finance it. Investors have lost confidence in the economy. They are pulling out. They are selling government bonds. They are not willing to buy any more bonds of government of Ghana. And the option now is to seek bailout from the IMF. And you know that Ghana is a member of the IMF. If not, they would not have allowed us to withdraw the $1 billion SDR 2 years ago. So the problem is how we have demonized IMF because of politics. And I'm happy that we have put aside politics to go in for a bailout or whatever you may call it, which will help save lives of people and lives of businesses. I think we are in need of it. All the 16 times that we have gone to the IMF, we were in need of it. IMF is just going to give you stability and policy credibility. Whatever you do with this is up to you as a government.
Doc, now the politicization of the IMF and the fact that this government has made a U-turn and going there. We also know that IMF bailouts or whatever always do come with some conditions. What are the expectations this time? Are we expecting to see some very strict conditions from the IMF?
Obviously, expenditure management, revenue generation. The first point of contact of IMF program is fiscal consolidation. Fiscal consolidation, we mean bringing down or closing the gap between revenue and expenditure. So IMF may propose certain revenue measures. May not necessarily be introduction of new taxes, but maybe to strengthen the collection, avenues of the GRA or whatever it is that they have to do to raise revenue without overburdening Ghanaians. And also the expenditure side, as it stands now, government cannot cut down expenditure. What they can do is to be prudent in the management of the expenditure. In any case, which of the expenditures are you going to cut? Is it compensation of employees or interest payments? I don't think so. Maybe because of the IMF program, government of Ghana can renegotiate the payment or defer the payment of interest on the loans that we have contracted. That will help us. But that is the only way that I'm sure the government can have some fiscal space. But when it comes to being prudent, cutting down waste, making sure that you get value for money, you price your projects well, that one I'm sure the IMF will instill discipline in government to do that. My fear and my concern has to do with the social intervention programs, that they should not touch it, because some of these social intervention programs are very crucial at this time that we are in difficulties. Imagine cancelling free SHS at this time when fuel prices have gone up, people are feeling the heat in their pocket, inflation is high, exchange rate is somewhere else, and government is cancelling free SHS for parents to pay school fees at this time. It may not be a good idea for us. So I hope that they don't touch on some of the social intervention programs.
Right now, Doc, per the statement we have seen, really it is for the finance minister to formally engage the IMF and invite the fund to support a government of Ghana program. Being specific on the word from you as an economist, and of course the homegrown solutions that government had preferred, and whether or not they made the necessary impact. What kind of would it be prudent to allow for the IMF to come in with their own program, or to go to the IMF with a government of Ghana program and seek support for?
Well, it depends on the assessment of the IMF. If they believe that your homegrown program is good for your economy, then they can give you the support. Remember that in my earlier submission, I mentioned policy credibility. So if you have your own program, why do people doubt your programs? And I personally, somebody has emailed me to ask me whether you should pull out from buying a government of Ghana bonds or so. An email from somebody in the US. So people have raised questions about our economy. And so it is up to the IMF to believe your policies or not. If they don't trust your policies, they'll throw it away and bring in whatever they think will suit you for example, discipline or expenditure. That one, no matter what you've written in your policy, they will instill discipline in you to make sure that you cut down waste, or you reduce, or you remove waste. And my second point is, so the first point is the credibility. If they believe your policy, why not? The second point is financing. Again, no matter how brilliant your policies are, you need financing. And so if they believe that your policies will not attract financing from the financial institutions, then they will give you a policy or a program that will attract financing to stabilize the economy. Remember that all that we are talking about is stability. IMF will not grow your GDP. IMF will not give you jobs. IMF will not industrialize your economy. IMF is only giving you stability. And I repeat, whatever the government does with the stability is up to government.
Now, Doc, with this financing you mentioned as your second point, I'd like to find out what going to the IMF will mean for our debts, and of course those we owe this debt to. Will this give them some impetus to start demanding payment of their debts?
Yeah, first of all, remember why government was so much in a hurry to pass the e-levy, because the investors had put that they were not sure government would be able to raise domestic revenue to service their debt if they lend their money to government. So the whole issue is about raising domestic revenue to service the debt. Okay? So if they give you the money, are you going to be able to raise revenue to service the debt? But before we talk about raising domestic revenue to service the debt, we must also talk about where the money must come from. So with the IMF program, the investors will be confident in our economy, and they'll be willing to lend to government. And then also, I'm sure multilateral organizations can come on board, like the African Development Bank, International Commercial Banks, all those multilaterals will be prepared. The World Bank will be prepared to come and support the government of Ghana that has an IMF program. So it is that credibility that we need to attract financing.
Now, as an economist, if you look at the reluctance, the feet dragging prior to going to the IMF, which largely, of course, we can attribute to politics. But from what you said as an economist, if you look at this, was there really any confidence in the homegrown solutions, for which reason we were reluctant to go for the program?
On the part of government, yes, they had confidence. They said they had a Batampa program that they were in need of 100 billion, and they didn't state where they were going to get 100 billion cities from. And as of now, we have known, they haven't told us how much they have been able to raise and all that. So it raises so many questions about the government's own program post-COVID, and therefore there is a need for us to get this program. The politics of it, when they came, they bastardized the NDC government for taking the economy into the IMF program and all that. But they had forgotten that Ghana is a member of the IMF, and therefore it is there to support countries that are in need of it. So I am so concerned about the politicization of it, because when you go to the market, we don't have a separate price of tomatoes for NDC supporters and NPP supporters. If you go to the pump, there's no fuel price different for MPP supporters and NDC supporters. So I just want us to put a stop to this politicization of government economic programs and economic policies and all that. Yes, you can criticize it. I have been criticizing both NDC and MPP programs, but I mean the over-politicization is really killing us. And I am happy that the government has overlooked whether there will be a political capital on the part of NDC. Maybe NDC will come back at them. If NDC comes back at them, it is their own fault. They started it. So, but I just want to see Ghana move forward. So, again, many people didn't believe in the policies of government, and that is why at the beginning of the year they started pulling out of the sovereign bonds.
Right now, Doc, 16 times we've gone to the IMF, 16 times we've suffered same conditions that sent us there the previous time. How are we expected to behave fiscally this time to ensure some sustainability?
Yeah, it's important you've raised this question. I mean, it's like you have a child in the house and you tell the child to discipline himself. He doesn't discipline himself, and you take the cane to discipline him. So, I mean, if you don't want any conditionality so-called from the IMF program. Why don't you discipline yourself in your country? Why do you wait and mess up and you go there? All the 15 times that we have gone there, we had messed up and there was a need for it. So I'm sure when they come, I mean, and again, if you track the record in all the 15 times, anytime the IMF program came to Ghana, they forced, I'm using the word, they coerced, you can use whatever term, coerced, they forced the government to be disciplined, to be fiscally disciplined. So as I said, the emphasis will be on revenue generation and expenditure management. They will make sure that the government is able to meet its revenue targets, plug the loopholes, some of the targets that they have set for itself, they'll meet it. Those who have decided to overprice government projects, all these things will come to light, bring down corruption. And I'm sure they will even take the Auditor General's report and scrutinize it and make sure that the government, manages the expenditure side carefully. So that discipline will be instilled in government, whether they like it or not. So they will have that discipline because there's somebody breathing down your neck to do what is right. Other than that, they will pull out. And when they pull out, all your international financing agencies will pull out and your economy will collapse. And we don't need that. And so if you don't want to go back to them, then you must be disciplined. You must be disciplined. We have not been fiscally disciplined as a country over the years. Over the years, we just raise revenue, chop it here and there. I'm using the local Ghanaian balance, chop it, chop the money here and there, left, right, center. I mean, it's not good for us. The few people are enjoying at the expense of the masses. You give contract, somebody overprice the contract, go and see the roads that have been constructed, it's raining now, and there's flooding all over.
Right.
So we have not been disciplined as a country. And I'm happy that the IMF is here to discipline us. If we don't want to discipline ourselves, they are here to discipline us. And I'm sure we will go. And I'm saying that the IMF program is not going to create jobs. The IMF program is not going to industrialize the country. It is not a long-term development strategy that they are bringing. All that they are coming to do is stability. They are going to give you stability from the point of view of policy credibility. So, like I said, whatever you do with the stability that the IMF will give to you, it's up to you. If you want to mess up and go back to them, then it's up to you. If you don't want to mess up, then when they give you the stability, try and grow your economy, manage yourself well to the extent that you'll be able to develop your nation. And coming back to the fiscals, it is about revenue generation and expenditure management. I just want, I hope they don't introduce any new taxes. I hope, because of the hardships that we are going through. Any new tax may be counterproductive, but maybe they can make sure that we get some of these revenue collection policies to make sure that everybody comes on board. Everybody. I mean, somebody will just go and take up his car from the port and run away without paying the duties. Who do want to pay the duties for you if you have imported a car? So all these things should be checked. The exemptions, all the tax exemptions must be cancelled or be reviewed so that we get the value for money in this country.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Edu Owusu-Sarkodie. But please stay with us. We'll be engaging you as we go ahead with the program. Dr. Edu Owusu-Sarkodie is a lecturer at the Economics Department of the University of Ghana. We want to speak to the president of Imani Africa, Franklin Cudjoe, who's also joining us via telephone. Good morning, sir.
Good morning to you and your producers and all my friends that are sitting.
Grateful. So Ghana, eventually we're going to the IMF. Relief or not?
Sorry, what's the question again?
Right, I'm asking, we're going to the IMF. President has given the go-ahead for the finance minister to begin engaging the IMF formally. Is this some relief for us, judging from the current economic challenges we are facing?
Well, it's relief that has come a bit too late. Don't forget the IMF conversation should take an upwards of about 3 months to finalize any deal. The writing was obviously on the wall already, and I think the president and his men had delayed unnecessarily. They should have been there much earlier and negotiated for better deals rather than right now going almost an ambulance where you are going to get what I call peanuts or peasants. Because other countries that have gone to the IMF on the continent, like Kenya, that got almost 2.2 billion at some point, did not go when they were this like us, right? So there were opportunities to have engaged long ago, and writing again was on the wall. But anyway, better late than never, and we are grateful for the moment. So the economy indeed has been very stupid.
But will this delay in going to the IMF hurt us more than heal us?
It's not a question at this stage of hurting us. The question really should have been how we eventually got there, right? And why we need the IMF right now. I mean, getting to the IMF also means clearly that your policy issues would now have some sort of credibility. Your creditors would have some confidence in you. So hurting us is probably an understatement. It's being overstated. I think we already hurt ourselves, and we needed this pain relief. Yeah, so I don't see anybody being hurt at all. I think if we are being hurt, it will even be positive. Because you see, actors like us and many others have been saying from the get-go that the government programs were too flamboyant. They were too expensive. They had no economic value. I mean, look at the creation of the 6th region. So just taking away useful resources. None of those regions are adding any value to the economy of Ghana, right? So expenditure like that, the creation of this ministry called Special Development Initiative, if you look closely, contributed to the over 13 times fiscal challenges that we had. You remember we did this index called the Fiscal Recklessness Index, where we found out that the infractions over the last 5 years have become 13-fold over the time John Mahama was in office. And the reasons are not far-fetched. It's only because of some of the bureaucracy that were erected and supervised by the president. It was just a matter of time things were going to catch up with us.
Doc, I mean, frankly, we know that IMF definitely will come with some conditions. We are yet to see or hear what these conditions will be. But government, how are we expected to behave to sustain whatever package we will be receiving from the IMF?
You're asking what government should do in order to sustain the package?
Right. How is government expected to behave?
I suspect that there will be deeper cuts. Look, my good friend Ben Boachi has on record said that, look, there are a number of people who have been employed at various ministries and added the numbers, necessarily technical persons who are not necessarily adding value, but are taking sumptuous salaries. So it looks to me that we need to begin those cuts from that particular angle. The cut must go deeper. Some of the programs must either be abandoned entirely or restructured, right? I mean, planting for food and jobs and all of those projects, this one village, one dam business, all these things must be assessed properly and then probably put on hold because they are just wasting money. Seriously.
So from your end, I mean, government should begin tackling some of these programs, but to ensure some fiscal discipline, where should we start from? Because we know there's the GDP issue, there's a debt sustainability or debt servicing issue, and then, of course, there's public sector wages as well, all these impacting on the economy.
So, my brother, the question we should be asking ourselves has always been, what has been the qualitative return on the investments we've made so far? In almost all the projects. So, very little, right? Even the famous RSHS, we are yet to determine what value addition is to make to the economy in the next couple of years. We haven't done any proper assessment of all those flagship projects to determine the value addition. It is time now to sit back and say, look, rather than sloganeering that this and this, one that, and one this, and planting that, animal this, plant this. We should rather ask ourselves, what value have we got in return when we have spent money on almost all these projects? Then you would have realized that, look, it's always better to do practical analysis, do some policy reviews, publish policy papers ahead of implementing policies that are even popular. We don't do that. And because we don't do that, there's a depth of analysis when it comes to understanding whether these policies are having impact. Look, who would have thought that with all the problems we have with government-created employment schemes, the e-levy, a portion of it was supposed to be used in creating employment. I mean, I think that was one thing I found quite astonishing, and somehow I'm quite happy that the e-levy is turning out the way it's turning, because it didn't make sense to spend government money to create employment schemes which turned out to be scams, really. Not just under this administration, but administrations before. So the kinds of rationalizations that are to be done could take into consideration some of these so-called use that, you this, you that. These are all nebulous projects that are just wasteful, because we never see the value in return, really.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned the e-levy, because we know that some of these IMF packages may come with the introduction of some taxes. But for the e-levy in particular, do we anticipate it being scrapped?
Well, the challenge is that the e-levy has become like, what's it called, the prodigal son. For it to be accepted, it has to be revised. I don't think scrapping it entirely would help, but the government must eat humble pie and come back and say, look, maybe let's go back to 0.5, which was the original position some of us held. Because we had evidence to show from the CST tax, when it was reduced from 9% to 6%, there was almost 150 million TD jump in the following year in the tax. So there's evidence to show that when taxes are lower, people tend to patronize or people tend to pay. And you see, with the e-levy, people had choices, really. It was an elastic tax. People had opportunity to do other transactions as well. Some of us decided, instead of doing transactions probably 5 times a week or something, we sometimes do it once in 2 weeks. You understand? So it was clearly the writing on the wall. I don't think they should scrap it, but I think they should come back and say, look, let's do 0.5%, and then let's have everybody contribute. But now they have another challenge of convincing everybody to pay the e-levy by the way. So I don't know. But we should encourage the government as well to undertake some of these reforms. I think the realization now is that the IMF rules, it's not, you see, again, the politics of it must be talked about. I don't think at this stage we're thinking so much about the politics. It's survival, and it's good that we have gone to the IMF. I think it's a good decision the government has made.
Right. Many thanks, Franklin Kujo there, President of Imani Africa. Grateful for your time and insight. But as mentioned earlier, prior to the decision to go to the IMF, government has been emphatic on its intent not to go to the IMF. We have one of such instances where the Minister for Finance, Ken Ofori-Atta, made such a bold statement. Let's take a look at this inset and we'll come back and continue with the discussion here.
Our expenditures alone will not be enough. Our focus is therefore twofold: to control expenditure and to raise more revenue domestically. As such, we will therefore begin the implementation and collection of the revised property rate by end of April 2022. We will implement the e-VAT, e-commerce, and e-gaming initiatives by end of April 2022. We will roll out a simplified tax filing mobile application for all eligible taxpayers by July 2022. We will impress upon Parliament to fast-track the passage of the e-levy bill, tax exemptions bill, and fees and charges bill. Prioritize the Revenue Assurance Compliance and Enforcement Program, the RACE program, to plug revenue leakage